A midlife crisis is more than just a cultural stereotype. It's a real psychological struggle that can surface between the ages of 40 and 60. Often triggered by aging, loss, or unmet expectations, it can actually lead individuals to question their identity, make impulsive choices, or abruptly abandon long term commitments. While not officially classified yet as a mental illness, the emotional and relational fallout is very real, especially for the spouses and families left behind. This podcast gives voice to those living through the aftermath, exposing the hidden pain, and seeking accountability, healing, and understanding. Thank you for joining us today on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. Hey, you guys, thanks for joining me today on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. Today, we're going to talk a little about the COVID pandemic. During and after the pandemic, there was a documented rise in domestic violence and coercive control. And not because COVID made people violent, but because chronic fear, loss of control, and emotional dysregulation collided inside homes worldwide. And midlife is already a high-pressure season. Add isolation, uncertainty, financial stress, health fears, and for some people, emotional regulation totally failed. That failure didn't always show up as physical violence. Sometimes it showed up as intimidation, surveillance, threats, explosive anger, false accusations, and sudden demands for no contact. Fear explains stress. It does not excuse harm. Most people who lived through pandemic fear did not become abusive, but for those already struggling with depression, entitlement, or control issues, the pressure intensified. It intensified what was already there, bubbling underneath. And this matters because when both partners are emotionally depleted, the risk isn't just disconnection, it's escalation. And as we know, something changed during the pandemic, not just society, not just politics, but people, marriages, personalities. And for many of you listening today, the timeline is impossible to ignore. A spouse who had always been stable, a marriage that maybe had tiny little problems but really felt solid, a life that suddenly blew apart emotionally, relationally, morally, right around or after COVID. And if you've been left asking, was it me? Did I miss something? Did they just snap? Well, today I want to talk about something uncomfortable but necessary. And that is pandemic fear did not cause midlife crisis, but man, it may have acted like gasoline on a fault line that already existed. Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a biological state. Fear isn't just being scared. Fear changes how the brain works. When fear becomes chronic, like it goes on for months or years, the brain starts to shift into a survival mode. The amygdala takes over, the nervous system stays activated, the part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, and long-term thinking, it goes offline. When fear lasts too long, people stop thinking and they start reacting. And that is where emotional dysregulation comes in. Midlife adults weren't just dealing with COVID. They were dealing with everything converging at once. We were dealing with midlife, career pressure or disillusionment, long-term marriages running on habit instead of connection. Then the pandemic hit and stripped away our routines, all the certainty we had, and all the control we thought we had over our lives. And for many people in midlife, control was the coping mechanism. And when that control disappeared, the nervous system panicked. And this is critical, you guys. Fear in midlife adults often doesn't look like anxiety or tears. It looks like irritability, emotional numbness, sudden impulsivity, and blame. That's when we started to hear things like, Oh, I've never been happy. I need a new life. This marriage isn't working out. Because fear convinces the brain that escape equals survival. I'm going to repeat that, you guys, because it's super important to know. Fear causes your brain to think that escape equals survival. And before we go any further, I want to pause here because this won't be true for everyone, but for some of you, it might be true. And that is, what if both partners were struggling? What if neither of you was emotionally regulated? What if both of you were depressed, exhausted, or coping by escaping instead of connecting? In many long-term marriages, there's an invisible role split. One partner becomes the emotional stabilizer. The other avoids, distracts, or escapes when things get uncomfortable. But when both partners are depleted at the same time, there's no anchor. No one slows things down. No one names the truth. No one says, we need help. So the marriage doesn't explode, it quietly shuts down. And two people can live in the same house and be profoundly lonely. COVID stripped away the usual escapes, like work, travel, busyness, social noise. And when escape disappears, then you're just facing fear. For one partner, that fear turns inward. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel so empty? For the other, fear may turn outward. Like, this life is wrong. This marriage is wrong. I need out. And when both partners are depressed, escape is rarely symmetrical. One partner may leave first, not because they hurt less, but because they can't tolerate the stillness. And the one left behind often thinks, if I was struggling too, why didn't I leave? Well, that answer is attachment. Two depressed people can love each other deeply and still be unable to sustain emotional safety together. This doesn't mean the marriage was a lie. It means both nervous systems were overwhelmed at the same time. And when two people are drowning, no one is left to steer the boat. So this is where so many of us got stuck. You didn't just lose a spouse, you became the problem in their story. And that's because when someone can't tolerate fear, helplessness, or depression, the psyche looks for somewhere to put it. And the closest mirror is often the spouse. So instead of them saying, I'm scared, I feel trapped, I'm overwhelmed, they start to say, you're controlling, you're unsafe for me, you're the reason I feel this way, it's all your fault. And that projection creates emotional justification for affairs, sudden discard, cruelty, no contact, and smear campaigns. Because now, once the spouse is framed as the villain, anything becomes permissible. Many midlife adults were already depressed before COVID, but it was functional. It was masked. They were distracted by work, travel, social life. But the pandemic removed the anesthesia. And instead of asking for help, because many midlife adults don't have that emotional language they need, the depression came out sideways. It came out as anger, restlessness, identity collapse, and for some, or most, it came out as destruction. Understanding fear does not mean excusing harm. Yep, the pandemic fear explains why emotional regulation failed, but it does not justify betrayal, abandonment, or cruelty. Plenty of people experience pandemic fear and did not destroy their families. The difference is this: some people turned inward and sought help, others externalized their pain and ran. Fear reveals character under pressure. And if you're listening and this is your story, I want you to hear this. You didn't miss a giant red flag. You didn't suddenly become unlovable. You weren't married to a stranger. You were married to someone whose nervous system collapsed under chronic fear. And instead of facing it, they escaped and rewrote history. And that is not your failure. Healing after this kind of collapse doesn't come from understanding them better. It comes from re-anchoring your own nervous system, releasing responsibility for someone else's choices, and naming the truth without softening it. Fear may have taken the steering wheel, but you don't have to live in the wreckage forever. So stop chasing the blast and give yourself grace. Thank you for joining me today, you guys, on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. I hope this explains the pandemic fear as more of an invisible accelerator of midlife crisis. It didn't cause midlife crisis, but it was certainly pressurizing an already fragile emotional system until it cracked. All right. Thanks again for joining me today, and I'll see you in our next episode. Hey guys, this is Trina, and I want to take a moment to speak directly to anyone who didn't choose the collapse but is living with the aftermath. When a spouse enters midlife crisis, the damage doesn't unfold slowly. It happens like an explosion. One day you're living a shared life. The next, the person you trusted has emotionally disappeared, rewriting history, minimizing the damage, and running from the very family they helped build. Friends are confused. The story gets simplified. And the spouse left behind is often expected to handle it quietly, gracefully, all while absorbing the fallout all alone. After the bomb drop, a survival guide for the left behind spouse was written for you. This book doesn't offer platitudes or false hope. It names what others avoid. Why chasing answers only deepens the wound, and how to stabilize your life after emotional abandonment, emotionally, legally, and within your family. In this book, we talk about why these departures feel so sudden and destabilizing, because they are. Why the spouse who stays is often blamed, erased, or silenced. Why saving yourself is not abandonment, and how to grieve someone who is still alive while finding your footing again. This book does not promise reconciliation. It offers you guys something more necessary at this time, and that is stability, dignity, and a way forward when someone else has chosen to run. After the bomb drop, the survival guide for the left behind spouse is available now on Amazon Kindle in both ebook and paperback. And if you're standing in the blast radius and wondering how to survive what you didn't cause, this book was written for you. Hey, some resources that are available for you guys are thewifeexpert.com. That's Lori McDermott over there at thewifeexpert.com. She also has a new app out. There's tons of videos that can give you all kinds of information on no matter where you are on your MLC journey or trying to reconcile with your spouse. So check out thewifeexpert.com. And if you're not sure if your spouse or yourself is in maybe approaching or in a midlife crisis, be sure to check out Kenda Root's quiz at midlifecrisismarriageadvocate.com. Again, that's a midlifecrisismarriageadvocate.com. That's a quick little 2-minute quiz. It's free. So check that out as well. We have a ton of resources out there for you guys. So check them out. Thanks. Hey, if you have a story you'd like to share with our listeners, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email mlcbombdrop@gmail.com. Again, that's mlcbombdrop@gmail.com. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. The stories and events discussed in this podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Any names, locations, or identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. Any similarities to actual persons, living or dead, or real events are purely coincidental. The information presented on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Always consult with a qualified expert regarding any decisions related to your specific situation. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the podcast creators.